All right, hello people from the internet. Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Nine Settler here for another YouTube exclusive that is not quite exclusive. Um, it is going to be a series where I talk about a bunch of spell schools, and I've already expressed these thoughts on my streams quite frequently, as I find these kinds of things in my runs that I stream. But I would rather have a video that's like those thoughts on a certain school centralized for people to easily check out. That doesn't that doesn't last as long as my usual runs. Um, so yeah, today we are gonna be beginning with Ice Magic. Um, but before I begin the video, I need to let you know that if you enjoy the content that I produce, you should consider subscribing on YouTube and following on Twitch. That does help me a lot. And if you really enjoy it, if you especially enjoy it, you should consider subscribing. You don't have to, and I understand if you don't want to or you can't for some reason. But I do appreciate it when you do. It does help me a lot. It helps me continue doing this. So there's that. With that being said, let's begin. As you can see, I am going to be beginning with Ice Magic because it's one of my favorite schools. One of my favorite backgrounds is Ice Elementalist, actually, and I like it because it's very powerful. Yeah, I like spells and skills and just things in general that are straightforward and very strong. And I would say that Ice Elementalist and Ice Magic is exactly that. So, as you can see, oh, sorry. Ice Magic contains a range of direct damage spells as well as some offensive effects. For example, creating temporary ice armor. Being skilled in Ice Magic increases the success rate and spell powers of spells in this school. Many spells belong to a combination of several schools, in which case the spellcasting success and power will depend on the average skill in these schools. Um, of course, I am a berserker with this character that I have in progress, so if you search this on a normal game, you're not going to see this. You're only going to see that if you are a worshipper of Trog. Um, but yeah, Trog really doesn't like it when you cast Ice Magic, or any magic at all. So these spells are definitely not worth considering on my current character. With that out of the way, let's begin. First spell is going to be a freeze. Freeze. Freezes an adjacent creature, dealing damage that bypasses any armor the target may have. This may temporarily slow cold-blooded creatures. It is a level 1 spell. The damage may look very underwhelming, but it's because it's a 0% power. It's at 0% power because, of course, I have no skills. So the damage gets better, but the most important thing about freeze is that it doesn't check armor class, doesn't check evasion, doesn't check shield, and is a spell that you begin the game with as an Ice Elementalist. So I would say that Ice Elementalist is really, really good. For for surviving the early game. You don't need to rely on actually hitting the monster or bypassing the monster's armor in order to be able to kill it when you have freeze and some of the other spells that I'm going to be talking about. Yeah, freeze is a very powerful spell, not only for Ice Elementalist to start, but also on any character that may want or is going to be a spellcaster. If you find a book with freeze very early into the game, it might be a good idea to pick it up because it's extremely cheap to get. It's only a level 1 spell, and it does offer a lot of utility, being really good against gargoyles, being really good against quokkas, adders, water moccasins, scorpions. You know, the scary monsters that have a lot of evasion and are fast, so you're not going to be outrunning them. Better bring the fight to them and fight on your own terms with freeze so you actually deal damage to them. I would recommend you to give freeze a try. Next on our list, we have Ensorcelled Hibernation. Ensorcelled Hibernation is not a spell that I like a lot. Okay. Lowers its target's metabolic rate, inducing hibernation. After awakening, the target will be unable to be put to sleep again for some time. This spell is a signature spell of the Enchanter background. It is pretty much the first spell that it gets nowadays. I am not a fan of this spell. This spell taught me to hate hexes. I learned what it's like to suffer through the pain that is trying to hex a monster like 7 times in a row and fail 7 times in a row. Um, yep. Personally, this is not a spell that I would go for on any character. I would barely consider it. I may be forced to use it on some very specific characters, for example, a Jin or other similarly unfortunate characters that just get this and nothing else, and they really want to be spellcasters for some reason. It's not a spell that is my favorite, of course. I think I've already mentioned it, but it might be good for you if you want to go for the Staver playstyle. I don't like the Staver playstyle, and therefore I don't like this spell. I also don't have a lot of things to say about this specific spell because I don't like to use it, and therefore I don't use it very frequently. Next on our list we have Ozocubu's Armor. Ozocubu's Armor. This one I enjoy a lot. This one is also part of the Ice Elementalist book. So yeah, you can start an Ice Elementalist today and get to play with a lot of the spells that I'm going to be mentioning. Anyway, Ozocubu's Armor envelops the caster's body in a protective layer of thick ice, granting a substantial bonus to armor as long as they remained in their current location. The ice will crack and fall away if the caster moves to a new position. The spell decreases in effectiveness in heavier armor, granting a lower bonus the higher the encumbrance rating of the caster's armor. As you can see, it's a level 3 spell, single school as well, so you're probably starting to notice a trend with Ice Magic. A bunch of the spells that the school has are single target, or sorry, not single target, single school, and that makes them really, really good. Very cheap to train, very effective as well. Also, Kubus Armor is a crucial part of the Ice Elementalist background because it gives you the defenses that you need to not die horribly to later monsters that you're going to be encountering on like D4, maybe D5, that actually can pack quite a punch. So you may be unable to kill them just straight up by mashing freeze in melee range, but Ozocubu's Armor gives you the extra protection to actually be able to kill them. Well, Ozocubu's Armor and the next spell that I'm going to be talking about, the combination of those two spells are extremely synergistic, really, really good. And like a big part of the Ice Elemental is the start, in my opinion. I think that start really sets you off for having a very easy and happy early game. Anyway, next on our list we have Frozen Ramparts. Frozen ramparts encases surrounding walls with ice for a short time, as long as the caster refrains from moving. Victims that wander near the icy walls will be damaged, and this may temporarily slow cold-blooded creatures. The damage dealt bypasses any armor the target may have. Each victim is only ever affected by one icy wall at a time. The caster and any allies can safely remain near icy walls. The ice will crack and fall away if the caster moves to a new position. So as you can see, Frozen Ramparts and Ozocubu's Armor share the same penalty of not being able to move. On the other hand, when you are so tanky and dealing so much damage, it's only a matter of actually starting the fight in a good arena, and then you won't need to move for the rest of the fight the vast majority of the time. Frozen Ramparts is pretty much an area of effect freeze. It freezes the monsters that are next to the walls affected every turn. It also doesn't check armor class or evasion or shield. It's yet another spell in Ice Magic that ignores all of those things. Really good in my opinion. This one, I would say it's even more of a hard carry spell than Freeze is. I think you can find a book that has Freeze and Frozen Ramparts, and well, if you get Freeze, you should also consider getting Frozen Ramparts. You may be on route to being an Ice Elementalist, even if you don't start as an Ice Elementalist, if you find those spells in the early game. I would recommend them a lot. I consider them to be very good, and yeah, not much else to say. Next on our list, we have Ice. Oh no, we have yeah, we have Hailstorm. Hold on, spell. We have Hailstorm. I often forget about this one because I don't consider it to be very good. Hailstorm conjures a cannonade of hail. The eye of the storm is wide enough that monsters adjacent to the caster are unaffected. Due to the strong impact and cutting edges, a significant portion of its damage bypasses cold resistance. Okay, so this spell does check armor class. It obviously, as it says there, it significantly bypasses cold resistance, which is a good thing. But it also has a really, really bad thing, which is that the monsters that are next to you are going to be completely unharmed by it. That and fact that it's level 4, so we're starting to get into higher level spells now. In addition to being conjuration eyes, so dual school makes it too expensive for what it does, and I very rarely get it. I may get it every now and then, but I know for sure that I would try to stay away from this spell because it's not my favorite. Hailstorm, in my opinion, is a bit flawed. And the vast majority of the time, the monsters that you actually want to kill the fastest are the monsters that are next to you, because those are the monsters that can frequently deal the most damage to you by meleeing you or hitting you with things like short range, highly damaging conjuration spells, like Crystal Spear, for example. Um, and Hailstorm doesn't hit those monsters. So I that's the main reason why I don't like this spell. But the damage is pretty decent. It also ignores evasion, like most ice magic spells do. So you don't have to worry about missing when you're using it against the Spriggans or things like that. So Hailstorm does have a niche, but it is a bit more sketchy to get going than the previous spells that I have talked about. Next on our list we have Ice Form, I think. Mm, we have Summon Ice Beast as well. Mm, okay. Ice Form transforms the caster into a frozen ice creature, light enough to float on water. The caster gains a freezing melee attack and becomes incredibly resistant to cold and resistant to poison, but weak to fire. High power increases the armor granted by this form. While transformed, any equipped weapons and armor all melted. So this is a transmutation skill, a spell that scales with spell power. It is level 4 dual school. It may be worth considering on some characters, but I almost never get this one. I do think that Ice Form can be good if you are a character that can actually take advantage of being forced to go into unarmed combat, so a character that has been training that. If you get an Ice Cave, even if you don't get an Ice Cave, around the lair part of the game, there's a lot of dudes that are weak to cold and also deal poison damage, so Ice Form might be good for some characters that need poison resistance. Yeah, I would recommend it on maybe if you're playing a really weird ogre, or sorry, not an ogre, a really weird troll that is actually casting spells. This spell could be good for that kind of character. Um, Specifically for a nice cave. Other than that, I guess transmuter. This is a transmuter's staple. This starts in the transmuter's spell book. When you begin the game as a transmuter, you have access to this. And it is okay. It is okay in terms of damage output, but it unfortunately makes you into a glass cannon. It melts all your equipment except for the jewelry, and it also makes you weak to fire. So it is definitely a stepping stone into the more desirable form spells. This is much more a transmutation spell than an ice spell. It's not something that an ice elementalist would think of picking up, because it really doesn't synergize with the ice elementalist playstyle. It's definitely a transmuter spell. But anyway, let's leave that aside and let's go for Summon Ice Beast. Oh, sorry, my bad. Okay. Summon Ice Beast calls forth a beast of ice to serve the player. The strength of the beast depends on spell power. So yeah, summon spells scale the monster that you summon, like scales the hit dice of the monster, and therefore scales the. Um, in the case of the ice beast, it scales the cold damage that the ice beast deals. Um, it scales the HP of the ice beast as well. Um, so a funny thing, I got this spell removed from the Ice Elementalist start. Um, I got it replaced with Metabolic Englaciation, and eventually that got removed too. Um, and I do apologize for that. But yeah, it is a pretty good spell. If you want to be a summoner, this is a really good spell for that. If you happen to find it as an Ice Elementalist, you might want to use it. Cast Summon Ice Beast, Retreat, cast Frozen Ramparts, and then just see how the monsters get melted or get frozen, I guess, by the Ice Beast and the Frozen Ramparts. Really good synergy there. And even if the Ice Beast was to die, you could fight on your own with Freeze and Ozocubu's armor. Or retreat, because the Ice Beast being in front of you does give you the chance to do that in that corridor. Um, so yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with this spell personally. I've not used it a lot, but I guess it's okay. As with all summons get better if you're fighting alongside your summon. If you're kind of a warrior mage type of character, you probably want to get one or two good summons to just take advantage of the fighting. Also, or take advantage of the fact that you can fight and cast spells. Also, distract some monsters. Make it so that those monsters target your summon instead of you with extremely dangerous, potentially lethal effects such as Crystal Spear yet again. That's the strength of summoning. But we are not talking about summoning today. We're talking about ice magic. So next on our list, we have metabolic englaciation. Metabolic englaciation lowers the metabolic rate of every creature in the caster's vicinity, slowing all those who are not resistant to cold. Cold-blooded creatures will be affected much more strongly, and tougher creatures will be slowed for a shorter time. So this is a mass slow effect. That is Hex's size, level 5, so kind of higher level. This can be very powerful, but it needs to be a specific kind of character that for some reason has very high spell power on hexes and nice spells. Because with low spell power, this spell is pretty bad. This spell is definitely not the kind of spell that you would like to have on the Ice Elementalist start, because the Ice Elementalist start does extremely well with low spell power. You don't really have to train Ice Magic past the point where you are actually able to cast your level 3 single school spells with the Ice Elementalist start. You can just do whatever you want after that. So metabolic englaciation really not synergistic with that kind of playstyle. I would not consider it on the vast majority of my characters. I wouldn't consider this to be a hard carry spell. It is a nice spell to have on a Jin because Jin checks all the marks for being able to use this spell. They get very high spell power on everything because everything scales off of spell casting. So there's that. As long as you keep pumping intelligence and spell casting, you should have high spell power on anything that you're casting as a Jin. But that is only true for a Jin. It's not true for any other character, pretty much. So I wouldn't consider metabolic englaciation on the vast majority of my characters. Next on our list, we have freezing cloud. We have freezing cloud. Oh, sorry. Freezing cloud. Conjures up a large cloud of lethally cold vapor. It is a very straightforward spell. You cast it, you target it, it places a bunch of clouds of cold vapor, which then proceeds to deal damage to monsters. This spell is very good. It's very strong. It is not a spell that I consider to get very often because it's a level 5/3 school spell, and that's very expensive to get going. I would consider getting it with Behumet, maybe Ashensari, definitely on a null. Like this spell is kind of made for a null. As a Jin, you don't have any issues with the spell being 3 schools. So if you get it as a Jin, do not hesitate to use it because it's kind of pretty good. Um, and it may also be good if you are already doing these things, which is actually kind of feasible because Ice Magic is just a straight up good in the early game. Conjuration is just a straight up good, period. And Air Magic, it's kind of more lacking of these, but maybe if you were an Air Elementalist that found the Book of Ice and then later on in the game found these, you would be very happy using Freezing Cloud. To add a bunch of damage over time to and to also be able to easily deal with monster bands because this spell melts the axe and death the axe and even like things later in the game that you wouldn't expect freezing cloud to kill, such as elves happen to be very vulnerable to this kind of thing because they don't have that much HP and they have a lot of evasion, but they don't have like a cold resistance, for example. So this spell very good for that. um, Next on our list, we have Simulacrum, I think. Yeah, we have Simulacrum next, unless I'm missing something. Simulacrum is a level 6 ice necromancy spell that creates a nicey replica from the corpse of the original being. This magic is unstable, so eventually the replica will sublimate into a freezing cloud. Simulacra cannot leave the level they were created on. The number of simulacra created depends on the size of the creature and spell power. I have zero experience using this spell because this spell is part of a playstyle that I don't enjoy one bit, which is the Necromancer playstyle. I try to stay away from doing that kind of thing. Whenever I train for Necromancy, it is for other spells such as Zombie Hands or Agony or Vampiric Drain, or if I'm going for an extended run, the good stuff like Death's Door, Mummy Form, Revivification. I like Haunt quite a lot as well. I don't get it very frequently, but I like it quite a bit. In my opinion, Haunt is a very good spell. So I cannot really provide good comment on Simulacrum because it is a kind of spell that because it is a necromancy spell that is level 6, I just don't get it. I just stay away from it. When it comes to these higher level spells, you kind of need to already be on the playstyle, or it needs to be like a legit hard carry spell for you to want to dedicate that much experience and time getting the spell online. This is not an example of a spell where I would like just commit into getting it even if I didn't have any training, but there's gonna be a couple of examples further down the line with these videos, so stay tuned. In fact, I think the next spell is exactly what I was talking about. So after Simulacrum, we have Ozocubu's Refrigeration. We have Ozocubu's Refrigeration. This spell is incredible. This spell is really good. It's incredibly powerful. This is one of the 2 spells that are staples for going and clearing a Ziggurat with not a lot of complications. Between Ozocubu's Refrigeration and Ignition, you have like all the overlap that you need and all the full screen damage that you could desire to kill the vast majority of Ziggurat levels. You can, of course, complement that with some higher level spells like Polar Vortex or Shatter or Firestorm. But the vast majority of the levels that you would see in a Ziggurat die to either Ozocubu's Refrigeration or Ignition or a combination of both those spells. So yeah, if you find 2 spells, I would recommend you to think about training for the 2 of them because the 2 of them can kill a ton of things in this game. You may need something for Orbs of Fire if you do decide to do that, so keep that in mind. Anyway, Ozocubu's Refrigeration drains heat from the caster and their surroundings, causing harm to all creatures not resistant to cold and bypassing any armor the targets may have. Prevents the caster from using potions for a brief duration. So as you can see, it's yet another cold spell that just completely bypasses defenses. Doesn't check armor class, doesn't check evasion, doesn't check shield. It is a single school spell, it is a level 7 spell. This spell is the kind of thing that if my character still doesn't have a game plan for the entirety of the game by the time I find this, I might want to consider going for it if I actually can do so, of course. Like I wouldn't do it on a troll monk of Wujian, for example, with like 4 intelligence. Of course, that's not the kind of character to go for a level 7 spell. Or for most spells, to be completely fair. But if my character is like, let's say I am a fire elementalist, and I've been walking around the early game just killing things with my starting book, and I find this thing on like D8, D9, I would instantly start training for it, and by the time I'm in like Lair 4, Lair 5, I should already be able to cast this, even with no other ice magic spells available. And yeah, this spell is really powerful. And it holds utility for the entirety of the game since the moment that you start casting it. It kills elves really well. It kills lair monsters really well if you happen to get it by lair. It kills orcs really well. It kills bolts denizens really well. It kills almost everything. It's really, really good. Hard carry spell. Actually, hard carry, win condition kind of spell. So I would recommend it. I cannot endorse Ozocubu's Refrigeration any more than I am doing. Next on our list we have, is this the last one? I may be missing some spells. I feel like this went by too fast, but the list of spells by school that I have in the Learn database is absolutely outdated. It's lacking some spells that I fortunately remembered about, so I already showcased them. But I think the next one is the final one, and the next one is Polar Vortex. Turns the air around the caster into a freezing vortex, doing tremendous damage to everyone caught in it that can only be partially mitigated by resistance to cold. Those affected will also be swept up into the air, and tossed around. Only the eye of the storm is a safe place, and it follows the caster. The vortex is unable to follow the caster to long-distance shrine locations. The spell's effectiveness is greatly diminished in closed areas. After the vortex fades, it cannot be called forth again for a short time. This spell is also really good. I'm pretty sure it doesn't ignore armor, but it does ignore evasion and it does ignore shield. This spell is like a reflavoring of Tornado. Tornado used to be an air magic spell, and it got reworked into being a nice magic spell that deals more damage than Tornado ever did, by the way. Of course, it does come with the downside of being partially resistible by cold resistance. This spell is a level 9 spell. It's single school, so it's one of those level 9 single school spells, the kind that I like the most. It is much cheaper to get this and Ignition than it is to get Firestorm, for example. So you have a lot of very good coverage if you get Polar Vortex and Ignition. And then not only are you getting Polar Vortex, but you're also getting Refrigeration, and you probably are getting an entire playthrough's worth of spells that are good at any stage of the game, such as the ones that I've already mentioned in this video. I consider this spell to be one of the few level 9 spells that the large amount of spellcasters that just don't go for extended and go for 3-4 runes can actually get, because it's a single school spell. So yeah, I would recommend you to give this spell a try. If you have a character that already has Refrigeration, this spell is really good for Orbs of Fire. It's really good for everything, in reality. It deals obscene amounts of damage. It's one of the most mana efficient spells in the game. because of the long duration of the polar vortex, it just melts everything that is standing on it. You might consider synergizing the or like combining it with Potion of Attraction because it has pretty good synergy. The monsters cannot stay away from you. Like even if the monster has blink away, it will still be pulled next to you, and therefore receive the damage of the polar vortex. So yeah, Polar Vortex is a really really good spell in my opinion, mm, and I don't have much else to say about it. And with that being said, this is the final Ice Magic spell, um, and I hope that this was useful and you enjoyed it. If you, well, I already said it at the beginning, but yeah, just do consider following here or on YouTube or on the two of them if you enjoyed what you saw. I stream 5 days a week, and I'm very consistent, and I always interact with chat and all the good stuff. Um, so, with that being said, thank you for watching, and have a nice rest of your day or night or whatever. See you around.